And as a result, the hubs of Dubai and Doha are incredibly important in aviation. Now, if they are shut down, very quickly, the ripple effects will spread. Just think about it. From Europe, from Europe to Asia, Australasia, from the United States to Asia, right the way down, Dubai is the global hub. And as a result, when it closed over the last couple of days, the effects were felt dramatically. Now, we are starting to see some flights starting again. Fly Dubai is doing limited flights. Emirates is doing limited flights. Certain corridors are being established. I won't go through the list because it could change hourly, and it really does depend on the flight and the destination. Yeah. But slowly but surely, they are starting to open up. But it'll be a long time before things are back to normal.
Right. You mentioned safe corridors. I'm just seeing in the last, 20 minutes or so, we heard from the UAE said that it opened, Richard, a safe air corridors with its neighbours. Just for our viewers who may have been stranded, who may want to know, is it safe? You know, the war continues on day 4. Tensions have been ratcheted up. It is expanding. What does this mean when you're talking about the UAE opening safe air corridors?
What you're talking about is bearing in mind the missiles flying around. The last thing you want, I mean, look, just remember, for example, the Kuwaiti Air Force brought down 3 US fighters as friendly fire. Now, that was where they intended to hit a plane and got the wrong planes. Just think of the number of missiles in the region flying around from Iran and others. And the last thing you want is a commercial aircraft anywhere near that. So what they're doing is working out which directions, which routes, which ways they can take aircraft from these hubs. And for instance, I'll give you a good example. Saudi Arabia, for example, has not closed much of its airspace, and most of its flights have been flying normally. That's because of its location. It's got better air defenses in a sense, and there isn't the same risk. It's not under attack. What we would expect to see, Issa, over the coming days is more of these calibrated and calculated air routes opening up. Always remembering, one stray missile will actually stop and will close the airspace all over again.
Richard Quest, good to see you, Richard. Thanks very much. And while I have you here, just before we came on, we came to you, Stephen. We were breaking news, of course. We were saying that a source, now we've got beyond the source, a US consulate in Dubai is on fire after being struck late, this was on Tuesday, so tonight, by suspected Iranian drone. And this is according again to a source in the region. This follows, of course, we've seen shutdown. We've seen the American embassies in both in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait both shut down. I mean, the pressure is intensifying, of course, on President Trump as Iran continues to retaliate.
Yeah, and I think this obviously would be a very troubling development politically for the administration. And it comes at a time when markets are tumbling. The president seems to be surprised that the Iranians went after Gulf states when that seems like it was an obvious potential response to him attacking Iran. And he said today that the whole thing happened too fast to get Americans out of there. Well, he was the person that ordered these strikes. So if anyone should have known about it in advance, it was him. So I think if this incident in Dubai turns out to be very serious, it's going to increasingly add up to the pressure on the president. In the past, we've seen when pressure builds, he tends to look for an off-ramp. And it will be interesting to see if the United States starts to talk about, well, we've destroyed everything we can destroy in Iran, and now it's time to move on to the next stage. Perhaps the Iranians coming out into the streets, and the president looks for a way out of this. But I think the clock, the political clock, is ticking for the president here, even though they were saying yesterday, well, this could go on for weeks or even a month or even longer.
Right, let me stay with the breaking news. Stay with us, Stephen. If you're just joining me, bring you up to date on the breaking news that we received in the last few minutes. A source tells CNN the US embassy in Dubai has been struck, as you can see from this video here, and is on fire. This is just a moment ago. This is in Dubai. We have seen, of course, American embassies also in Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait was shut down. But this coming into CNN, source telling CNN the US consulate in Dubai has been hit by a suspected Iranian drone. We can see a plume of smoke there, black smoke, and we understand it's on fire. We're getting more information. I think our Jennifer Hansler with us. Jen, what more are you hearing on this?
Well, we're not hearing much of anything yet, Issa. We've asked the State Department if they can confirm anything on this suspected Iranian strike on the consulate in Dubai. But of course, as you're saying, this is the latest in a series of suspected Iranian attacks on U.S. diplomatic facilities. Last night, we saw 2 suspected Iranian drones hit the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh. 2 more hit at or near the embassy, sources told me. There were no injuries initially reported with that strike. We don't know yet if there were any injuries with this latest strike on the consulate in Dubai. Earlier this week, the embassy in Kuwait was also hit. So this is coming amidst this massive, massive retaliation in the region. Of course, this also comes, Issa, as the State Department last night ordered the departure of non-emergency personnel and their family members from 6 countries in the region. That included the UAE, that includes Kuwait, it includes Qatar, Jordan, Iraq as well. And so they are calling on all non-emergency personnel to leave the countries. They've also temporarily closed 3 embassies for now because of these safety concerns. So there are still small footprints of diplomats in all of these countries in which they have ordered the departure. But this is a very fast-moving situation here. This is, a very, very risky time to be an American in this region. The State Department just announced that they are working to facilitate commercial flights and military flights for American citizens who have been stranded there in the region, Issa, and we are going to continue to keep following this story.
If you're just joining us, Jen, stay with us, bring up viewers up to date. We are now hearing from a source, a U.S. consulate in Dubai. As you've seen, that plume of smoke has been hit by a suspected Iranian drone. We've been told it's on fire. We can certainly see on this footage here a plume of black smoke. It is 53, almost 54, almost midnight in Dubai. Can I take a step back, Jen? Do we know, I know you were saying some people have left from these consulates. Do we know if this consulate was still active in Dubai, how many people were inside? Do we have any of that, a sense of that? I know some of the other embassies have been closed. What do we know about this one in particular, just to get ascertain how many people could have potentially been inside?
We don't have a sense right now, Issa, of how many people are inside. The hope, of course, would be that there were no one there because it is so late in the evening there. The United Arab Emirates had been put on ordered departure yesterday, which means they were calling on only the essential small staff to stay. And a number of these posts, they've also had people shelter in place, work from home. So they may not have actually been in this facility. That would be the hope in this case, so that there are no injuries. We don't know yet if there was anyone there. We are working to get answers here. But this is, of course, what the State Department tries to prevent. They try to keep their diplomats safe, and sometimes that calls on them to have them leave the country. There have, of course, been questions about why these ordered departures weren't ordered sooner ahead of that initial U.S. and Israeli strike that happened over the weekend, which precipitated all of these Iranian retaliatory attacks. So there are questions here about why these warnings weren't issued sooner, both for the diplomats on the ground as well as the U.S. citizens who are there. But we have started to see days later the State Department moving towards helping their diplomats leave the country as well as U.S. citizens.
Yeah,
but of course, a lot that's uncertain.
Absolutely, and I'm just looking at the Dubai media office. They've put out a tweet. We have a translation. I'm just going to read it out as we look at these images. The competent authorities in Dubai succeeded in extinguishing a limited fire in the vicinity of the U.S. consulate in Dubai, resulting from a drone targeting operation, and the incident did not result in any injuries. So for viewers joining us now, no injuries, thankfully, but U.S. consulate in Dubai being hit in the last few moments by suspected Iranian drone, and it is on fire. Our thanks to everyone in this hour. Breaking news. We'll have much.
As the United States and Israel's war on Iran continues, our breaking news is that the U.S. consulate in Dubai is on fire after a suspected Iranian drone strike. That's according to a source in the region. Video obtained from X a short time ago shows black smoke rising into the sky in the area around the consulate building. You can see how it's that built-up area, so very close to home for many people. Nick Robertson is in Riyadh. Nick.
Yeah, this seems to be a systematic effort by Iran to intentionally target US embassies, US consulates in the region. The US consulate in Dubai tonight, dramatic images of huge plumes of black smoke rising over the skyline there. Dramatic pictures that many people probably never imagined that they would see, even if the United States and Israel went to war in Iran. That is what is happening. The assessment here in Saudi Arabia is that Iran retains control, command and control of what it does militarily, and it is systematically, carefully, in a calibrated and calculated way, targeting things that it believes will cause maximum panic, maximum disruption, and maximum pressure on the White House to end the war. Overnight last night, 4 drones impacted the US embassy here in Riyadh. The embassy is now closed. In the afternoon today, there was an imminent, immediate threat to the US consulate in Dhahran in the east of the country. The warning went out that there are potentially ballistic missiles, potentially drones incoming. Shelter in place. Don't go to the consulate. Don't leave your home. Overnight, last night as well, in Jordan, the embassy, we understand, was evacuated. The day before, the US embassy in Kuwait appeared to be the target. Black smoke billowing around there. So this is what appears to be happening. It is stark. These images are stark. We know that Dubai, we know that the UAE, we know that Bahrain, we know that Saudi Arabia, we know that Qatar, we know that Oman, we know that Kuwait have got air defense systems. They have been very effective. Yesterday, Saudi shot down 5 missiles fired at a big airbase just outside of the capital here. They shot down missiles, suspected Iranian drones that were fired at a huge oil refinery. There was some damage. But the picture that emerges is somehow Iran seems able to get drones through to key US premises that send a voluminous signal and message across the region here. Particularly think of all those people that are stranded in those Gulf countries. They can't fly out because the war has essentially shuttered the airspace there. And now they're seeing these prime diplomatic once is an end of the war. Max?
Nick, what are your contacts saying in the region? How much longer can these Gulf states accept these hits? You know, this is, as you say, symbolic that so many people in the world know. How long can they take these hits without responding themselves?
Everything's calibrated, everything's on a scale. You know, a country like Saudi Arabia, an apex oil producer in the Gulf region, huge oil producer. Let's say if Iran was to specifically target upstream, we call them upstream oil facilities, so it's not just like the last bit where the oil gets put on the tanker, but way further upstream. You know, I'm not going to it would be wrong for me to put down information that perhaps Iran would like to use. Of course, they can make their own calculations, but an attack that decimates oil production capability in any of these Gulf countries is huge, and it's significant. And drawn into a war where Iran is smashing their oil infrastructure, they're smashing Iran's oil infrastructure, because ultimately this has to be built. Ultimately they have to continue to live into the region, so live in the region together when the war's over. But your question raises a fundamental point. How much more can they take? And that's a real and active question that's under debate. They will not stand back, I don't think, and watch the decimation of their critical infrastructure. Saudi has said very clearly that it will protect its sovereignty, its territory, its infrastructure, its people, its territories, and they reserve the situation to respond to aggression. But they don't want to get drawn into what they would calculate at the moment, Iran's intentional effort to draw them in, intentional effort to escalate. And from perhaps a real hard, realpolitik position. At the moment, it's only drones that are doing this damage that we see in Dubai tonight, that we saw in Riyadh last night, that we saw in Kuwait the night before. If it were ballistic missiles that Iran was using, and Iran has an option here, when it decides to target somewhere, it has an option, what it should target, when it should target, what it should target with. That's the assessment here in Saudi Arabia. So the assessment would be, at the moment, Iran's just using drones. If Iran steps up the escalation ladder and starts using ballistic missiles to try to target a Saudi oil infrastructure, let's say, that would be much harder to stop and potentially way more destructive than a drone, the game begins to change. So you can see there's room, if you will, to absorb more. There's reasons to absorb more, but the image that's being created here is there is a threshold. We don't seem to be at it yet. We don't know quite how close we are to it, Max.
Nick, thank you so much. Let's go to Jennifer Hansler at the State Department as we look at these images, Jennifer. I mean, this is, I don't know quite how to describe it, the city that everyone knows. People are close to it. It's central. It's the city that relies in large part on tourism. What is the State Department saying about what happened here?
Well, we haven't heard anything yet from the State Department, Max. We heard from the UAE Media Center, the Kuwait Dubai, Media Center, saying that no one had been hurt in this incident. We have not yet heard from the State Department if they have gotten full veracity on all of their personnel. I should note that they were sheltering in place, the personnel in the United Arab Emirates, and it is one of several countries that were put on an ordered departure yesterday. That means that the State Department has ordered all non-emergency personnel and their family members to leave the UAE, along with 5 other countries in the region, as these Iranian retaliatory strikes continue to play out. As Nick noted, this is not the first diplomatic facility to be hit by suspected Iranian drones. We saw the embassy in Riyadh be hit last night. The embassy in Kuwait was hit both yesterday and on Sunday, as Iran continues its retaliation across the region. Now, I think there are going to be questions here, Max, about why these embassies were not put into ordered or authorized departure earlier. That's when you're given the option to leave the country. That is always something that the State Department is considering in these high-risk situations. So they finally did trigger that yesterday. There are also, of course, a number of concerns about the American citizens who have been stuck in the Middle East since the start of these military operations. We have finally started to hear some responses from the State Department today, saying that they are working to facilitate both charter commercial flights as well as military flights out of the region. The UAE is one of the countries that the State Department said it is working to facilitate flights for the Americans who are stuck. But this is a very dangerous, very rapidly escalating situation for both American citizens as well as American personnel on the ground there, Max.
We have had the good news, if I can call it that as well, that the UAE are developing a air corridor, safe air corridor, which will allow flights to leave the UAE. So Americans will be able to get back to the US, but there's going to be a long queue, of course. They're going to be pretty angry, aren't they, that they were left in this stranded position with events like this happening around them because there was no plan in place for them.
Yeah, I mean, the president himself said today when asked in the Oval Office that they didn't have an evacuation plan because they weren't expecting such a quick retaliation. Now, of course, that if that is in fact the case, that is a really, really shocking admission because, you know, the State Department, as Secretary of States across the board throughout history, have said their top priority is protecting American citizens abroad. So it is typical that they would have some sort of contingency plan in place to help Americans. But we have heard from folks on the ground who are incredibly frustrated and incredibly scared because they have been stuck in what has now essentially become a war zone for days and days. And we saw, of course, yesterday there was a tweet put out by the State Department calling on Americans to depart now from some 14 countries in the region on commercial travel when there was virtually no commercial option available to them. So there is a lot of anger, a lot of fear among the people who are stuck. And of course, Max, as you mentioned, there's going to be a long queue of people trying to leave, and there are concerns about how they might even be able to access these flights as there are shelter-in-place orders in place and, you know, the continued threat of Iranian retaliation.
Yeah, and there's the cost of all that as well, particularly the Americans that live in Dubai and how they're going to get support going forward. Thank you so much, Jennifer. Now, Donald Trump says he doesn't even know who is still alive amongst Iran's leaders. Israel struck the building earlier today that supposedly contained the group of Iranian leaders picking a successor to Ayatollah Khamenei. Iran claims the people inside the building were evacuated before the strike, but it's worth noting that they also claimed Khamenei was alive until they admitted he wasn't. The Iranian Red Crescent says the death toll from days of attacks by Israel and the US is approaching 800. This as Iran continues to fire back at both Israeli and US bases across the region. The vast majority of those counterattacks are being shot down. Donald Trump says Iran's military has been decimated.
That is coming along, as you see very well. They have no Navy, it's been knocked out. They have no Air Force, it's been knocked out. They have no air detection, that's been knocked out. Their radar has been knocked out. And just about everything's been knocked out.
But the conflict is expanding beyond Iran. Israel hit numerous targets in southern Lebanon and Beirut on Tuesday as it battles Iranian-backed Hezbollah forces. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu says his forces are ready to move into southern Lebanon to prevent Hezbollah from attacking Israelis.
Hezbollah made a very big mistake when it attacked us. We have already responded with force, and we will respond with even greater additional force.
Jeremy Diamond joins us now from Tel Aviv. How significant would a ground operation be, Jeremy?
Well, we've already seen some Israeli troops moving into positions in southern Lebanon beyond the 5 positions that we know Israel has continued to control since that ceasefire went into place more than a year ago between Israel and Hezbollah. The question is, will they continue to go even further? You know, the last time Israeli troops went into Lebanon over a year and a half ago, I believe it was, we saw Israeli troops take up a thin strip of land in southern Lebanon. Ultimately, they did not continue to march towards Beirut or anywhere approaching the Lebanese capital. And we've heard no indication that that will be the case this time either. But what is clear is that Israel is intent on trying to destroy Hezbollah's capabilities in this latest round of this conflict once and for all, with the Israeli military chief of staff saying that they plan to deliver a devastating blow to Hezbollah, framing Hezbollah's decision to enter this war in support of Iran as a serious miscalculation. At the same time, we're continuing to watch as Israel and the United States are pummeling Iran, including the Iranian capital of Tehran. Today, we saw this report of a strike targeting the Assembly of Experts. That's the group of 88 senior Iranian clerics that were supposed to be gathering in order to pick the next supreme leader following the assassination of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in the opening round of strikes on Saturday. Israeli officials say that they're still waiting for the battle damage assessment from that strike, but the Israeli ambassador to Washington, Yechiel Leiter, he said that he believes there is a, quote, very good chance that those electors will not be readily available for future elections, an indication that Israel believes this strike was successful, even as Iranian state media says that the meeting was evacuated prior to the strike. Max.
Jeremy, thank you so much for that. President Trump denying that the US was forced into a war with Iran by Israel. The president making those comments earlier today in the Oval Office. Instead, Trump says the US may have instead forced Israel's hand, explaining that Iran was going to attack first and the willingness of the US to prevent that may have pushed Israel to join them. Kristen Holm joins us from the White House because I can't keep up with the reason all of this started, Kristen.
Yeah, and Max, clearly pushing back there on Secretary of State Marco Rubio's remarks that really changed the narrative yesterday afternoon. We had just had this briefing from the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, as well as from President Trump. They seemed to be on the same page for the first time in public, taking questions, at least in the case of case of Pete Hegseth, you had President Trump speaking in public with a definitive line on why, at least from their perspective, they went into this war or this attack and what the objectives were. And then you got to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who threw in this idea that perhaps it was because we were forced into it because Israel was going to strike them no matter what, and that the United States had learned that Iran was able to strike back and retaliate and would against American assets. So because Israel was going in, we had to as well. Now, this, of course, rankled an enormous amount of people across the board, including in President Trump's own base, who said that we were following Israel into a war after President Trump had promised not to go to war and to instead end wars. It does seem, though, as though they all being the White House, walking that back. I've gotten a number of clips sent to me of different parts of what Rubio said yesterday that stressed the same objectives as President Trump. And of course, you have President Trump pushing back, saying, no, it was probably us that forced Israel into this. But they are remaining by this talking point that they believe that there was the development of a nuclear program, that they believe that there was going to be eventually a capability of long-range missile strikes, and certainly that they had and were gathering short-range missiles. So now it seems as though that is where they are going when it comes to the messaging. But again, this comes after days of a back and forth. I mean, originally we were told that there was that they had learned that there was intel for a preemptive strike, which seems to have now been completely taken off the table, a preemptive strike of Iran against American assets. So they do seem to be following the same messaging now after what we heard from Rubio today. Now we have President Trump correcting the record. But they're still very much, piecing together a narrative that they want out there. And of course, one of the big questions that we've all been asking for the last several days is what happens now? What is the next day plan? And it's very unclear. I mean, President Trump was asked specifically, who do you want to lead Iran? And he said, well, most of them are dead now. So it seems as though it's a little bit unclear what the next steps are here, at least for the United States.
And it's enormously expensive, and there seems to be an awareness that this is going to backfire to some extent in the US in terms of the economy. Oil can't get out of the region, oil and gas, and that's driving up the price of oil and gas in the United States. But President Trump addressed that, didn't he, talking about escorting oil tankers through that key Strait of Hormuz?
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly what he just said. He posted that they might start doing that to escort these oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. But he also noted, and this is something that none of these candidates right now in the United States who are going to be running for a midterm in November want to hear him say, that the prices are likely to go up before they go back down. And we also know that he was sitting down with the German chancellor, who said that all economies, the European economies as well as the United States, were going to be deeply impacted by this, even though President Trump tried to brush it off. But clearly now that he is putting out this statement on potentially escorting these oil tankers.
Okay, Kristen, I'm going to interrupt very rudely, but Marco Rubio is speaking, so we're going to go to him.
Middle East in need of assistance. It is very important, and I ask this of the networks as well, it is important for you to please put both the website and the phone numbers on your screens, because we need people. We need to know where you are. We need to know. We need to have contact information for Americans that need assistance. They have to register with us, because as these options begin to open up, and as they open up, we have to be able to call you. We have to be able to reach you. We have to be able to know where you're staying, so we can get this information to you and coordinate appropriately. And it'll be a variety of methods: charter flights, military flights and transports, expanded commercial opportunities, and in some cases land routes that will allow them to go to neighboring countries who might have open airports at that point. So it's a lot of different things here that need to happen in order to move people, but it all starts by knowing that you're there. It all starts by knowing that where you are and how we can get a hold of you. So I'm asking the networks and all of the media outlets, please publicize the two phone numbers that we've put out, as well as the website, so people can contact us and register. We've had, thousands of people call already. As I said, we've identified almost 1,600 that are requesting assistance with departure, but we need you to please be able to identify that. As I came in, I also saw the media reports about Dubai's consulate. The last update I had with seconds before getting before these cameras was that a drone unfortunately struck a parking lot adjacent to the Chancellery building and set off a fire in that place. All personnel are accounted for. As you're aware, we began drawing down personnel from our diplomatic facilities in advance of this. In the cases, for example, of Beirut, we basically drew down to bare bones, as well as in Baghdad and in Erbil and in a couple other posts as well. So we've been very fortunate, obviously, but our embassies and our diplomatic facilities are under direct attack from a terroristic regime. With an update, I will obviously refer you to the Department of War. Suffice it to say that our objectives remain as they've been identified from the beginning and by the President laid out clearly yesterday. Iran can never have a nuclear weapon, and we will now not allow Iran to hide behind the immunity of a massive short-term ballistic missile inventory or the ability to make them or launch them. And so CENTCOM, in a joint operations, is carrying out a systematic destruction of their missile belt, destruction of their launchers, and destruction of their ability to make these, as well as the destruction of their Navy. From what I've been told by the Department of War, everything is on or ahead of schedule and proceeding on these objectives. We have every confidence in the world that these objectives will be achieved. The last point I would make is, and I said this yesterday and I repeat, what's about to, you're about to see, we're going to unleash Chang on these people in the next few hours and days. You're going to really begin to perceive a change in the scope and in the intensity of these attacks as, frankly, the two most powerful air forces in the world take apart this terroristic regime and defang it and take away its ability to threaten its neighbors or hide behind a zone of immunity that allows them to develop their nuclear ambitions. This terroristic, radical, cleric-led regime cannot be ever allowed to have nuclear weapons. We saw what they were willing to do to their own people. They were willing to slaughter their own people in the streets. Imagine what they would do to us. Imagine what they would do to others. Under President Trump, that will never, ever happen.
Mr. Secretary, yesterday you talked about Israel. Mr. Secretary.
Please, guys, I can't hear them all. Yes.
Yesterday, you told us that Israel was going to strike Iran, and that's why we needed to get involved. Today, the president said that Iran was going to get.
Yeah, your statement is false. So that's not what I was asked very specifically. Were you there yesterday?
Yes, I asked you a question.
No, were you the one that, because somebody asked me a question yesterday, did we go in because of Israel? And I said, you were asking me that follow-up. And I said, no. I told you this had to happen anyway. The president made a decision, and the decision he made was that Iran was not going to be allowed to hide behind its ballistic missile program, that Iran was not going to be allowed to hide behind its ability to conduct these attacks. That decision had been made. The president systematically made a decision to systematically destroy this terroristic capability that they had, and we carried that out. I was very clear in that answer. This was a question of timing, of why this had to happen as a joint operation, not the question of the intent. Once the president made a decision that negotiations were not going to work, that they were playing us on the negotiations, and that this was a threat that was untenable, the decision was made to strike them. That's what I said yesterday, and you guys need to play it. And if you're going to play these statements, you need to play the whole statement, not flip it to reach a narrative that you want to do, all right?
This is your statement. This is your statement, Mr. Secretary.
Go ahead.
What do you make of the War Powers resolution that's being considered here?
I mean, Congress votes on those. They can if they want. There's mechanisms for it. We've complied with the War Powers Act, even though we believe it's unconstitutional, as has every other administration. Every other president has found the War Powers Act to be unconstitutional. Nonetheless, we notified Gang of Eight, which was an appropriate mechanism by which to notify Congress. We sent the notification within 48 hours, the way the law requires. I'm here today to have, I don't know, my 6th or 7th briefing before the entirety of the House and Senate, which is far more than I ever got from any administration in the time that I was here, certainly when I was a member of the Gang of Eight. And so we've over-complied with the law and what it requires. This is an action by the president to address a real threat, This is hostilities designed to eliminate a threat to the safety and the security of the United States and to our allies.
Mr. Secretary, can I get answer you do? Can I read the Secretary?
Was there a plan in place to evacuate Americans before the attack took place?
Well, that's the plan we're trying to carry out. The problem is, or the challenge we are facing, is airspace closures. If a country closes their airport, for example, in some cases the airports have been hit. So the airport in Kuwait was hit. So if an airport's been attacked or the airspace is closed, then we can have the planes lined up to go, but we can't get them to land because we don't have the permissions to land there. So that's the challenge. But rest assured, we are confident that we are going to be able to assist every American. As I told you right now, we have about a little over 1,500, maybe closer to 1,600 Americans requesting assistance. And we know that we're going to be able to help them. It's going to take a little time because we don't control the airspace closures. That said, there may be more people out there that need help. We need to know who you are. So please, I'm asking the media, publicize the phone numbers and the website because we need people to call in so we have their name, we have their contact information, we have their location and their request So as these opportunities begin to open up, we can act very quickly to reach them and get them out of harm's
Mr.
way.
Secretary, I want to just clarify what you said. Because you said...
There's nothing to clarify.
Well, but you said...
No, but you have to read... If you're going to read the whole statement...
But your quote is about, we knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that would precipitate an attack.
Yeah, no, I understand. But listen,
forces.
all right, but let me understand.
And that's what...
Yeah, but I had a very specific question from that gentleman,
and
right?
the president said that...
Hold on one second. I asked
he may have forced Israelis.
Okay, but let me answer, because this is my press conference.
Sure.
Okay. You asked me, I was asked a very specific question. So you guys can misrepresent it, but I was asked a very specific question yesterday. The bottom line is this. The president determined we were not going to get hit first. It's that simple, guys. We are not going to put Americans' troops in harm's way. If you tell the president of the United States that if we don't go first, we're going to have more people killed and more people injured, the president's going to go first. That's what he did. That's what the president will always do. He will always put the safety and security of our men and women in uniform and of all Americans before anything else. He's always going to do that, and that's what he did here. In addition to that, I would argue that this threat from Iran, they are hiding behind these missiles and hiding behind these drones. They wanted to reach a point where you couldn't touch them, and then they could do whatever the hell they wanted with their nuclear program. And there is no way in the world that this terroristic regime was going to get nuclear weapons, not under Donald Trump's watch.
So the U.S. attack has nothing to do with Israel. It has nothing to do with Israel.
This operation, there's a general question of why the president gave the green light, and then there's a question of why did it have to happen this weekend? Are you saying it had to happen this weekend because of that Israeli action?
No, this weekend presented a unique opportunity to take joint action against this threat. And we wanted this to have maximum success. We want this operation to be successful at achieving its objectives. I'll repeat the objectives. The president laid them out yesterday. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. It cannot have, and therefore it cannot have the things it was hiding behind to have a nuclear weapons program. What are those things? Number one, we are going to destroy their missiles and their missile launchers. We are going to destroy their capability to make these missiles and these launchers, and we are going to destroy their Navy. Those are the objectives, and this weekend, acting at this time, gave us the highest probability of success in achieving those objectives, and as the Department of War will brief you, we are on or ahead of schedule to do that.
So the U.S. attack would have happened no matter what? Would the U.S. attack have happened no matter what Israel was planning to do?
The House said Israel was going to act with or without...
The president had already made a decision to act. On the timing, the president acted on the timing that gave us the highest chance of success. And that's what you're seeing play out right now. You're seeing it play out right now, and you'll see it in the days to come. We will systematically take apart their missile program. We will destroy their ability to sponsor terrorism, by the way. We will destroy their factories. We will destroy their Navy. Those objectives are going to be met. We're well on our way to meeting them. It will not be easy. There will be a price to pay for it, but that is a much lower price to pay than having a nuclear-armed Iran. I got to go brief these guys. Hold on. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
How credible is the administration leading into the 2001
What now?
How credible is the administration?
Well, that's not our notification to Congress. Our notification, listen, let me explain to you guys this in simple English. Okay? Iran is run by lunatics, religious fanatic lunatics. They have an ambition to have nuclear weapons. They intend to develop those nuclear weapons behind a program of missiles and drones and terrorism that the world will not be able to touch them for fear of those things. And this is the weakest they've ever been. Now is the time to go after them. The president made the decision to go after them, take away their missiles, take away their Navy, take away their drones, take away their ability to make those things so that they can never have a nuclear weapon. That's why the president made this decision. It was the right decision, and the world will be a safer place when these radical clerics no longer have access to these weapons. You see how they're using them now. Imagine how they would use them a year from now if they had more of these. All right, I got time for one more. Yeah, go ahead.
Several Democrats criticized what you said.
Yeah, of course they could have. The question is, several Democrats criticize. They're going to always criticize. We've been doing this for years, guys. They come out. I'll tell you right now, they're going to come out after the briefing and say, we didn't hear anything. We have more questions than answers. You mark my words. But we still do these briefings. Go ahead.
Mr. Secretary, their criticism was on the timeline. They said that Israel is dictating the timeline for the United States.
No, the president...
As you know, several people on the right have also agreed with that. How would you respond to
that? Well, the United States made a decision. Under the President of the United States made a decision. This is intolerable. Iran cannot have these missiles, cannot have these drones, cannot threaten the world. The President said this is the weakest they've ever been. If we don't hit them now, a year from now, a year and a half from now, no one will be able to touch them, and they'll be able to do whatever they want. And he made a decision to go. And he made a decision to go in a joint operation because it gave us the highest chance of success, and he made the decision to go first because he concluded that we were not going to get hit first. We were not going to absorb a blow from them. We were going to go first. He was not going to run the risk that they could attack us before we could hit them, because in addition to costing lives, it would undermine the effectiveness of our operation. All right, guys, I got to go. Thank you.
Marco Rubio answering a whole list of questions there. First of all, addressing that dramatic video that we've seen from Dubai of the US consulate there, saying there was a drone attack on the car park there, started a fire. Everyone has been accounted for in that building. Then talking about the assistance that the State Department is now offering Americans. There's been a huge amount of criticism after a statement yesterday saying the State Department can't offer any assistance. Now they are offering a mixture of charter and military flights as soon as they can get the airspace, he said, urging people, though, to notify the State Department that they're there. Currently, they have a list of about 1,800 Americans wanting to get out, but he wants everyone to get in touch with the State Department so they know that they're there. Finally, this comment that he made yesterday, which was interpreted as saying that America went into this conflict because Israel was going to go in anyway. That was clarified by President Trump, saying actually it was the other way around. America is very much leading on this. Rubio saying, his message yesterday was basically misinterpreted, and he's on message with the president. We'll be right back.
In Iran, if you're just joining us, I want to bring you up to speed on what we know so far. US President Donald Trump says most of Iran's military installations have been knocked out, his words, and that new strikes today focused on killing Iranian leadership. Israel says it launched simultaneous strikes in Tehran and in Beirut. The targets were Iranian military sites as well as the Iran-backed militant group Hezbollah. All the while, Israeli troops are intensifying their push in Lebanon. And as for Iran, you ask, well, its military continues to strike US targets and US allies in the Middle East. And here you can see in yellow all the countries around the Persian Gulf that have been hit. The US has closed its embassies in Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and warned Americans to leave more than a dozen countries in the region. Joining me now in the studio to discuss is Burcu Urçelik, a senior research fellow for Middle East Security at RUSU. Good to have you on the show.
Thank you.
There is so much for us to talk about. I do want to start with the intensification of these strikes that we have seen from the US and Israel. The Central Command was saying something like 1,700 strikes we've seen so far. We're in day 4. Give us a sense, we're looking here at these strikes and how spread out, of where have they been focusing on, what they've been targeting in these last 4 days, and how effective they've been.
So the coordinated attacks by the U.S. and Israel have focused on the western part of Iran, that stretch of land that borders Iraq. And the reason for that is that's where the location of Iran's, the majority of its missile launchers are, as well as radars. So by that, I mean the capability of the Iranian regime to attack westward. They also have air defense installations in that stretch of land, which means that they would be able to protect against incoming missile strikes towards the inside of Iran.
And I suppose at this juncture, it's quite hard to know how effective these strikes have been. Do we have a sense how effective the US strikes, Israeli airstrikes have been on the missiles capabilities or so?
We do, in a sense, in that we have reporting by the U.S. and by Israeli sources as well that are claiming that these have been highly effective to date. And when we look at the pace, the tempo of Iranian strikes, retaliatory strikes against the Gulf, the Persian Gulf down below in the GCC countries, we're seeing a slight slowing down in that pace, which could suggest that the Iranian stockpile of ballistic missiles are becoming depleted.
Right. Expand on that, because now we're looking, in the initial image, we were looking at US-Israeli strikes on Iran, just for our viewers. Now we're looking at Iranian strikes on the Gulf. And this is expanding horizontally, right? I've heard from multiple guests now talking about how surprised they are that Iran has made a decision, the strategy to go after Gulf states. Before we talk about what you think about the strategy, tell us why they've hit some countries and not others, because they've been using mostly drones, is that right?
That's right, they have been, as well as some missiles. But the focus has been on territories that host U.S. military assets, personnel, and interests. And the Iranian regime made that very clear in the lead-up to the campaign or this war as well, that they would target American interests across the region, which explains why they have hit countries like Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE. Oman was a key facilitator during the talks, which have been initially excluded from Iran's strike package, but then was also hit. We have Jordan as well, which is a key US and UK security ally in the region, and of course the most intense in Israel, as well as the UAE actually was also hit very heavily.
Yeah. Are you surprised at all by this strategy from Iran to go after some of these Gulf states? Does that isolate them further, or is there a strategy here from the Iranian side?
There is a strategy here, and I think what that is to create pressure and pain on the U.S., but as well as Gulf states. And the message to the Gulf is you're hosting American military installations, so you have to bear the risk of this. And this is a moment of great existential crisis for Iran. So it seems as though their plan, the strategy, is to go all out in order to pressure the Gulf countries to then talk to President Trump, to put pressure upon him to de-escalate, to draw down, to find a way towards a ceasefire.
Right.
But there is a gamble here.
I was going to say, that could backfire, right? Because I was speaking to our correspondent who was in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, where leadership there is really weighing this moment. If this intensifies, how do they proceed? And that is the risk, is it not?
It very much is the risk. There's a great deal of resentment, a sense of betrayal across the Gulf. This is the very scenario that they were hoping to avoid and have been following the diplomatic track for a long time to encourage this not to happen. So at this moment, I think the Iranian strategy is very likely to backfire because it invites future military engagement by the Gulf states, potentially, as well as maybe other countries in Europe as well.
So just for our viewers, we've looked at how the US and Israel, where they've been striking inside Iran. We've also been looking at where Iran has been retaliating, of course, across the Gulf region, mostly with drones, of course. And I want to focus now on US bases, because you hinted at that there, why they're picking certain countries over others. I suppose, where are we seeing in terms of US capabilities and them getting ready for if this continues to escalate? Where are you seeing the biggest developments here?
Along
and the risks, of course.
Along the Persian Gulf. They're in the military bases, particularly the naval fleet in Bahrain.
So all around this line
That's
here.
right. That's right. These are where American assets are most vulnerable, but also most protected. But Iranian attacks there are also a distraction because U.S. forces have to focus on defending those assets as well as defending their allies in the Gulf. So there are multiple interests there as the U.S. and Israel try to support efforts to keep the Gulf as safe as possible in this moment of great crisis, really.
Indeed. Great to have you on the show. Thanks very much for coming. Really appreciate it. And French President Emmanuel Macron says his country cannot approve military actions by the US and Israel in Iran. In a flurry of diplomacy, he held separate meetings with several regional leaders today to discuss the situation in the Middle East. And moments ago, President Macron addressed the nation. I want you to have a listen.
The attacks launched by American and Israeli missile strikes against Iran have now spread throughout the region and continue to have serious consequences for world peace and security.
Trump also took time today to discuss the thousands of Westerners who are stuck in the Gulf region with few days really to get out. He said the operation against Iran unfolded so quickly there was no time to evacuate embassies or warn tourists or others actually to leave. Air travel has been severely restricted since the war began, with busy international airports in the UAE and Qatar virtually shut down and flights cancelled all over the region. I want to bring in our resident expert, global travel, Richard Quest, joins us now. Richard, good to see you. When we're talking about air travel going at a standstill, give us a sense of what numbers we're looking at here.
You're talking about tens of thousands of people and hundreds, if not thousands, of flights. And for one simple reason, over the last 15 to 20 years, Doha, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, they have become the global hubs for world aviation through the airlines of Emirates, Fly Dubai, Etihad and Qatar Airways. They bring the passengers in and they fly them out again. It is what's called a classic sixth freedom flight. And as a result, the hubs of Dubai and Doha are incredibly important in aviation. Now, if they are shut down very quickly, the ripple effects will spread. Just think about it. From Europe, from Europe to Asia, Australasia, from the United States to Asia, right the way down, Dubai is the global hub. And as a result, when it closed over the last couple of days, the effects were felt dramatically. Now, we are starting to see some flights starting again. Fly Dubai is doing limited flights. Emirates is doing limited flights. Certain corridors are being established. I won't go through the list because it could change hourly, and it really does depend on the flight and the destination.
Yeah.
But slowly but surely, they are starting to open up. But it'll be a long time before things are back to normal.
Right. You mentioned safe corridors. I'm just seeing in the last, 20 minutes or so, we heard from the UAE, said that it opened, Richard, a safe air corridors with its neighbours. Just for our viewers who may have been stranded, who may want to know, is it safe? You know, the war continues on day 4. Tensions have been ratcheted up. It is expanding. What does this mean when you're talking about the UAE opening safe air corridors?
What you're talking about is bearing in mind the missiles flying around. The last thing you want, I mean, look, just remember, for example, the Kuwaiti Air Force brought down 3 US fighters as friendly fire. Now, that was where they intended to hit a plane and got the wrong planes. Just think of the number of missiles in the region flying around from Iran and others. And the last thing you want is a commercial aircraft anywhere near that. So what they're doing is working out which directions, which routes, which ways they can take aircraft from these hubs. And for instance, I'll give you a good example. Saudi Arabia, for example, has not closed much of its airspace, and most of its flights have been flying normally. That's because of its location. It's got better air defenses in a sense, and there isn't the same risk. It's not under attack. What we would expect to see, Issa, over the coming days is more of these calibrated and calculated air routes opening up. Always remembering one stray missile will actually stop and will close the airspace all over again.
Richard Quest, good to see you, Richard. Thanks very much. And while I have you here, just before we came on, we came to you, Stephen. We were breaking news, of course. We were saying that a source, now we've got beyond the source, a US consulate in Dubai is on fire after being struck late, this was on Tuesday, so tonight, by suspected Iranian drone. And this is according again to a source in the region. This follows, of course, we've seen shutdown. We've seen the American embassies in both in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait both shut down. I mean, the pressure is intensifying, of course, on President Trump as Iran continues to retaliate.
Yeah, and I think this obviously would be a very troubling development politically for the administration. And it comes at a time when markets are tumbling. The president seems to be surprised that the Iranians went after Gulf states when that seems like it was an obvious potential response to him attacking Iran. And he said today that the whole thing happened too fast to get Americans out of there. Well, he was the person that ordered these strikes. So if anyone should have known about it in advance, it was him. So I think if this incident in Dubai turns out to be very serious, it's going to increasingly add up to the pressure on the president. In the past, we've seen when pressure builds, he tends to look for an off-ramp, and it will be interesting to see if the United States starts to talk about, well, we've destroyed everything we can destroy in Iran, and now it's time to move on to the next stage. Perhaps the Iranians coming out into the streets, and the president looks for a way out of this. But I think the clock, the political clock, is ticking for the president here, even though they were saying yesterday, well, this could go on for weeks or even a month or even longer.
Right, so let me stay with the breaking news. Stay with us, Stephen. If you're just joining me, bring you up to date on the breaking news that we received in the last few minutes. A source tells CNN the US embassy in Dubai has been struck, as you can see from this video here, and is on fire. This is just a moment ago. This is in Dubai. We have seen, of course, American embassies also in Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait was shut down. But this coming into CNN, source telling CNN, the US consulate in Dubai has been hit by a suspected Iranian drone. We can see a plume of smoke there, black smoke, and we understand it's on fire. We're getting more information. I think our Jennifer Hansler with us. Jen, what more are you hearing on this?
Well, we're not hearing much of anything yet, Issa. We've asked the State Department if they can confirm anything on this suspected Iranian strike on the consulate in Dubai. But of course, as you're saying, this is the latest in a series of suspected Iranian attacks on U.S. diplomatic facilities. Last night, we saw 2 suspected Iranian drones hit the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh. 2 more hit at or near the embassy, sources told me. There were no injuries initially reported with that strike. We don't know yet if there were any injuries with this latest strike on the consulate in Dubai. Earlier this week, the embassy in Kuwait was also hit. So this is coming amidst this massive, massive retaliation in the region. Of course, this also comes, Issa, as the State Department last night ordered the departure of non-emergency personnel and their family members from 6 countries in the region. That included the UAE, it includes Kuwait, it includes Qatar, Jordan, Iraq as well. And so they are calling on all non-emergency personnel to leave the countries. They've also temporarily closed 3 embassies for now because of these safety concerns. So there are still small footprints of diplomats in all of these countries in which they have ordered the departure. But this is a very fast-moving situation here. This is, a very, very risky time to be an American in this region. The State Department just announced that they are working to facilitate commercial flights and military flights for American citizens who have been stranded there in the region, Issa, and we are going to continue to keep following this story.
If you're just joining us, Jen, stay with us, bring up viewers up to date. We are now hearing from a source, a U.S. consulate in Dubai. As you've seen, that plume of smoke has been hit by a suspected Iranian drone. We've been told it's on fire. We can certainly see on this footage here a plume of black smoke. It is 53, almost 54, almost midnight in Dubai. Can I take a step back, Jen? Do we know, I know you were saying some people have left from these consulates. Do we know if this consulate was still active in Dubai, how many people were inside? Do we have any of that, a sense of that? I know some of the other embassies have been closed. What do we know about this one in particular, just to get ascertain how many people could have potentially been inside?
We don't have a sense right now, Issa, of how many people are inside. The hope, of course, would be that there were no one there because it is so late in the evening there. The United Arab Emirates had been put on ordered departure yesterday, which means they were calling on only the essential small staff to stay. And a number of these posts, they've also had people shelter in place, work from home. So they may not have actually been in this facility. That would be the hope in this case, so that there are no injuries. We don't know yet if there was anyone there. We are working to get answers here. But this is, of course, what the State Department tries to prevent. They try to keep their diplomats safe, and sometimes that calls on them to have them leave the country. There have, of course, been questions about why these ordered departures weren't ordered sooner ahead of that initial U.S. and Israeli strike that happened over the weekend, which precipitated all of these Iranian retaliatory attacks. So there are questions here about why these warnings weren't issued sooner, both for the diplomats on the ground as well as the U.S. citizens who are there. But we have started to see days later the State Department moving towards helping their diplomats leave the country as well as U.S. citizens.
Yeah,
but of course,
and
a lot that's uncertain.
Absolutely, and I'm just looking